Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. We know you guys are getting ready for Thursday night football that kicks off in just over an hour, and we are going to be bringing you all of the Week 13 preview leading into that delightful game. Seahawks are playing the Cowboys tonight. I took the Cowboys on Tuesday, as did Dennis. Are you having any motivation to change?
No, but I fully expect the Cowboys could lay an egg. But, man, Dak has been so hot. Tony Pollard's been playing well the last 2, 3, 4 weeks. He's kind of on a roll. So, CeeDee Lamb is CeeDee Lamb, and the defense just gets after it, and Geno struggles with pressure. So, we'll see if Geno can hold up. No, I'm still comfortable with Dallas.
I am also still taking Dallas, and if you are taking the Seahawks or leaning that way, no Ken Walker tonight. So, that is definitely something to keep in mind. Be curious to see how Charbonnet does against this defense. I wasn't that impressed with his first start, but then I remembered they were playing the 49ers. I'm not sure it gets a lot better with Dallas. So he gets his 2 starts against 2 tough NFC defenses.
Didn't Kyren Williams run all over the 49ers?
He might have. Kyren Williams is a special talent.
I don't know if he's a special talent, but I think he ran all over the Niners.
This week, we have 6 teams on a bye. I misspoke on Tuesday. I think I said Arizona was on a bye. They're actually not. Arizona and Washington are the Week 14 byes. This week, we have Buffalo, Chicago, the Raiders, who I saw this week. Their owner, Mark Davis, is mulling whether he can bring John Gruden back. You're welcome, Las Vegas. The Minnesota Vikings, the New York Giants, and the Baltimore Ravens are the 6 teams that are out. But the first game that we'll look at for Week 13, 6-5 Indianapolis Colts at the 4-7 Tennessee Titans. Jonathan Taylor injured his thumb, had surgery, I believe they said today. So we know we're probably getting a steady dose of Zach Moss. Early in the season, Tennessee was pretty good against the run, but they haven't been as great lately. You still confident in Moss?
Man, they were so good against the run early in the season that Zach Moss put up 165 yards against them. So
that makes me feel better because I did Zach Moss as a start this week.
I mean, Fantasy Pros has him ranked as RB23 this week, and I'm not sure that feels like low. I feel like he should be top 10, top 12 at the worst.
I had him like around 14.
So I just feel, see, what did I mean by this note? I feel like, okay, this may be what Tennessee has given up to running backs. 73 yards to Carolina, 93 to Jacksonville, 60 to Tampa, and 157 to Pittsburgh in their last 4 games. But Moss ate them up in the first time they played this season. So I feel pretty good about Moss. He went for 165 and 2 in Week 5. So that's good. Tennessee gives up 16 fantasy points to running backs. That's middle of the pack. I expect him to outperform that. I think he's going to hit that 20-point barrier. And I'm all in on Zach Moss this week. I feel kind of, we're going to have to consider, in the fantasy football roundtable redraft league, pushing back that trade deadline because Zach Moss ain't doing anybody any good on Cole's team right now.
Yeah, it's too bad. Meanwhile, for the Titans, a name we have not heard in a long time, Traylon Burks is fully practicing, may actually play. The one receiver we know they're going to have is DeAndre Hopkins. We love the name, we love the talent. We haven't seen incredibly consistent production. How are you feeling about him?
Yeah, he's been really hampered by the quarterback play. You know, in some situations, we've had the young quarterbacks come in and just feed the stars. Now, DeAndre isn't quite what he used to be. He's still pretty good though, but I think he needs the team around him to be better. In week 5, in the same game that Zach Moss went off, DeAndre Hopkins went off. He had 11 targets, 8 catches, 140 yards. So they got him ranked as wide receiver 18 this week. That feels about right. I feel like the opportunity is there. I want to see, can Will Levis start to get it going a little more? And this may be a good game for Derrick Henry as well. And if they can get that balance going, that's definitely something that helps DeAndre Hopkins' game. Is if they can't, they're just not keying in on him.
I have Hopkins probably low end wide receiver too. Also, I am taking the Titans in this one.
I'm going Colts.
Next up, we have the 4-7 Los Angeles Chargers at the 2-9 New England Patriots. And I have to say, if the Chargers lose this game, I don't think Brandon Staley gets allowed on the plane back to Los Angeles. We've seen Keenan Allen doing pretty well in the passing game. We had thought Austin Eckler is a guy we could rely on. Justin Herbert's actually been their leading rusher the last few weeks. How are we feeling about the Chargers running game?
It's weird because Eckler, how many games did he miss? 4, 5?
Yeah, 4 or 5 going into their bye.
He actually is RB15 on the season, so he's been productive. It just hasn't been on the ground. He's still getting some touchdowns here and there. He's catching a lot of passes, if not gaining a ton of yards. They got him ranked as RB5 this week, and that just feels high to me. Not that I expect a ton out of the Patriots, but just based on the season he's having, that feels like he'd have to severely outperform it. I like Eckler, and I just feel more like he's a back-end RB1 this week still.
Meanwhile, for the Patriots, Demario Douglas still not practicing. Bailey Zappi seeming to get more of the first-team reps, so the Patriots refuse to name a starting quarterback. Aside from Ramondre Stevenson, is there a Patriot you're playing?
Man, I'm ready to fire up Malik Cunningham, running that triple option from the quarterback position.
There seems to be little talk about him having any kind of substantial role, which...
Yeah, well, I know they said...
Bill Squared probably not interested.
That Cunningham and Zappi took all the first-string reps. And that feels like it was for show. I don't have any insight into Mac Jones, but I'm hearing in several places, several commentators, that his confidence is shot right now. Well, the team has been playing terrible. They're not giving him much as in the way of receivers. For all of the good things Bill Belichick has done, he's not good with wide receivers. He cannot evaluate wide receivers to save his life. But Pop Douglas has been going off pretty well. He's flex worthy since he started playing regularly. He's wide receiver 43 since week 7. Well, that's not going to blow the roof off the doors. It's somebody you can put in your lineup in one of those flex positions. The QB finishes since week 7.
Are you talking about Demario Douglas?
Yeah.
He hasn't been practicing. I don't think he's going to play. They said they're considering moving him down to doubtful.
Is he concussed?
I don't think it was a concussion. I think it was something else.
If he doesn't play though,
it says concussion.
Quarterback be damned. That's the kind of game that then Devontae Parker comes in and catches 7 passes for 85 yards. Makes himself worthy.
Yeah, it looks like Kayshon Boutte is not able to practice either, and neither is Ezekiel Elliott. So nothing like setting Bailey Zappi and or Malik Cunningham up for success. I'm taking the Chargers.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Chargers as well.
Next up, an actually decent game in the NFC: the Detroit Lions 8-3 at the 5-6 New Orleans Saints. Both teams coming off of tough Week 12 losses they need to rebound from. Dennis, Jared Goff has struggled the last couple of weeks, been kind of a little bit of a turnover factory. It was interceptions in Week 11. It was a lot of fumbles on Thanksgiving Day. How are you feeling about Goff?
Man, he needs to get back on track after that 3 fumble debacle on Thanksgiving Day. But I mean, so here's every Detroit fan right now. Stop talking about the moon. Because, when the waxing gibbous moon on Thanksgiving Day, they just can't win. I don't know if that's what it is, but they did. They didn't.
I'm going to say that's what it was.
Yeah. They did not look good. The Saints are poor against mobile quarterbacks, but Goff isn't mobile, and they're good against pocket passers. So it seems like this is setting up to be another challenging game for Jared Goff. He's got to get the ball to. He's got weapons with Montgomery and Gibbs and Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and even Jameson Williams is converting occasionally on the deep ball. Josh Reynolds is clutch. So there are weapons. If the offensive line can keep it together for him, and he can get back some of that sense of pocket awareness, so he's not putting the ball on the ground when he gets sacked, because, he's away from home, so he's going to get sacked. I feel like he's probably, somewhere between QB 10 and QB 16 this week.
He got sacked plenty at home last week, too.
Yeah.
For the Saints, Rashid Shaheed still not practicing. Limited practice for Olave, who's coming back from a concussion. You're playing Alvin Kamara. Given the state of the other weapons, how are you feeling about other options for the Saints?
I mean, it feels like Juwan Johnson is the winner by virtue of attrition. Is what it seems.
It's going to be Taysom Hill now that you've said that.
And honestly, if they can put Juwan Johnson out in the they can flex him out into the slot. Put Foster Moreau in at tight end. Have Taysom Hill out there just doing something. A.T. Perry was a guy that the week Thomas got injured, he went out and earned 4 targets and a touchdown. But then last week, coming off the bye, he only earned 2 targets. So I'm a little puzzled by that performance. You would have thought he would have improved a little bit. But Detroit is strong versus running backs on the ground and through the air. So while Kamara you're not going to sit Kamara, he's going to be up against a challenging defense. So I like Juwan Johnson to go along with Kamara. I think you probably got to, if you can flex Taysom Hill, you flex Taysom Hill. A.T.
Or
Perry
play him at tight end, given the state of the tight end position.
Yeah.
I am taking the Lions.
I'm going to take the Lions to bounce back too.
Next, a horrendous game in New York, the 5-6 Atlanta Falcons at the 4-7 New York Jets. Dennis, Desmond Ridder is supposedly the starter for the rest of the season. He didn't look great last week, and now he gets a pretty good New York Jets defense. How are you feeling about Ridder?
It's going to be dicey. So the Fantasy Pros has him ranked as QB 23. Now, I will say, on the plus side, the Jets give up the 4th most rushing yards to quarterbacks. And Ridder can
Why
run.
the hell are you running with Ridder when you could just give it to one of your 27 other? Just run the wishbone. Don't even play Ridder anymore.
And you're right. They also can be run on with running backs. They give up the 8th most fantasy points to running backs, 6th most rush yards, 8th most receiving yards, and 3rd most receiving touchdowns. So it feels like it's a situation where Bijan and Algier will be very productive between the 10s. There's opportunity for Ridder to pop it in from the end zone, into the end zone with running. Ridder's not a guy I'm confident in throwing the ball against DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner. I'm just not. He's going to – this feels like a 17 pass attempt game, to be honest.
Might be the way they win. For the Jets, meanwhile, they open the 21-day practice window for Aaron Rodgers, who is practicing. I still don't know about the wisdom of bringing him back, but if he was going to come back, you'd want them to be able to get wins down the stretch. You're probably playing Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. Any other Jet that interests you?
No, not at all. I mean,
the Tim Boyle era does not offer a lot of high highs.
I mean, Alan Lazard was a healthy scratch. In desperation, maybe Tyler Conklin, but even then, in his good weeks, he's barely hitting, 9 points. So he's basically a guy you plug into your tight end position during a week with 6 buys to hopefully avoid a 0.
I am taking the Falcons in this one.
I am too, because I don't want to see them mess up Aaron Rodgers.
More than he messes himself up.
Yeah.
Arizona Cardinals 2-10 at the 7-4 Pittsburgh Steelers. Dennis, how do you feel about James Conner?
Man, he only played 3 more snaps than Michael Carter last week. He outsnapped him 30-27. He had an opportunity edge of 11-8, so he's still the top guy there. But Michael Carter, when he was in New York, he was the 2-minute back. He's good in the passing game, good receiver, capable runner as well. Connor's, I don't want to say he's a plotter, but he's not as agile as he once was. I think that it's a split. I think Connor still gets the edge. But like a lot of tandems that we're seeing, there's one guy that's the explosive guy. There's the Keaton Mitchell, the Jaylen Warren, that second guy that he's going to get only, 40 to 45% of the opportunities, but he could easily put up 60% of the production with those touches, because the other guy's going to get, Connor's going to get all right, it's 3rd and 1 and they got 9 guys in the box and we're going to let Connor get us, 15 inches.
For the Cardinals too, they released Zach Ertz today, so that is good news. If you're rostering Trey McBride in Dynasty, I think wheels up for him, and he's been great the last few weeks.
But McBride's been injured all week too, though.
I looked at the practice report. He's been practicing, so
yeah.
I just more meant now there's no impediments in his way, any potential return.
Kyler Murray.
Kyler's actually been pumping it to him. It's Marquise Brown that he seems to have forgotten exists. For the Steelers, they get to play another team that is not great against tight ends. The Cardinals allowed Tyler Higbee to go off for a couple of touchdowns last week, so that could be good news again for Pat Freiermuth. But I want to talk about the backfield. They made Jaylen Warren nominally the starter starting last week, but it sure seemed like Najee Harris was the better back. How are you approaching that backfield?
So we're in the time of the year that Najee Harris is heating up. He's starting to ascend a little bit. They're giving him the touches. He's getting plenty of opportunity. Warren is RB27 on the year, and Harris is RB25. So they're not that far apart. Honestly, I'm approaching it as Najee is an RB2 and Warren is a flex. But it wouldn't surprise me if they're much like they are currently on the year, 2 spots apart. I think they finished the year within a half a dozen spots of each other.
Damn.
So they limit each other's ceiling, but they're both productive enough for your fantasy teams.
I'm taking the Steelers in this one.
So am I. I'm in on the Cardinals in the Marvin Harrison sweepstakes.
Next up, we have the Miami Dolphins 8-3 at the 4-8 Washington Commanders. Dennis, we've seen Miami just pound some lesser competition, which usually equates to pretty big days on the ground. Achane back to limited practice, seems to be tracking toward playing. Mostert probably playing. Jeff Wilson going to be available. How are you approaching the backfield?
So Washington has given up 100+ yards a game 3 of the last 4 games. And, the Dolphins have rushed for 100+ yards in 7 of 11 games, including what they rushed for against Denver, 700 yards or something like that.
Why are you doing this to me?
They've got Mostert projected at RB12 and Achane at 39. I think there's some question about Achane. Him and Wilson are just 2 spots apart. Wilson's at 41. So I do think that if Achane is out I would expect Wilson to increase 10 to 12 spots. So into the high 20s probably is where I would project him. They have a great running game, and they're dynamic in the passing game. But Washington just isn't good against the run. And so
might have done Jack Del Rio a favor by letting him go before he had to face the Dolphins based on what we've seen.
He doesn't have to have that on his resume.
The Commanders, they were a little feisty at the beginning, but they've been getting walked all over the last few games. They got blown out by DeVito and the Giants. They also got blown out by the Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day. How in the world do they try to keep it close against a robust offense like Miami?
What they need to be able to do is grind it out with Brian Robinson. But they're going to chuck it with Sam Howell. It's part of their DNA now, I think. I don't think they know how to. It feels like when they try to run, Ron Rivera is so predictable in what he wants to do when they run, they can't sustain drives. And whether that's him kind of pushing Bieniemy in that direction, or Bieniemy that's just what he does. Maybe he doesn't. I mean, they've got Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, Logan Thomas, and Sam Howell. That offense should be able to move the ball. Even with Sam getting sacked 10 times, they should be able to move the ball.
They should be able to, but I'm taking the Dolphins.
So am I.
Big game in the AFC, 6-5 Denver Broncos at the 6-5 Houston Texans. Dennis, part of the 5-win streak here for the Broncos has been focusing on the running game, where they've really been pounding it with Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine. But we've seen the Texans be a little better against the run this year under DeMeco Ryans. How are you approaching the Broncos backfield?
So Javonte's RB23 over the past 5 weeks. Perine is RB40. So, Perine's flexible. There's some games that, he may only give you 6 points, but he's got 10 to 12 point in his range of outcomes on a weekly basis. I like that they're giving Javonte a much heavier workload, also getting him involved in the passing game. Unfortunately, on a couple teams that I'm rebuilding, it's amazing the low ball offers that I'm getting for Javonte Williams as I'm trying to trade him away. It's frankly disgusting.
Yeah. On the flip side, the Texans have not been running that well overall. We saw a couple of great games from Singletary, but when it's been Singletary and Pierce, it's been a little rough. Denver's defense, however, has been pretty stout against the pass, but has been much better to run on. So how are you feeling about the Texans backfield?
The Texans backfield is, Singletary is the productive rusher there because he fits the scheme. The way they worked Pierce back into the mix, I got to believe that he's executing in practice. And that's what makes Slowick go, all right, I'm seeing that you can do it because you're doing it in practice. And then in the games, he must either the blocking isn't quite as good in games because you're going up against an opponent that's maybe giving you a little better effort than your own defense is, or something that just isn't quite clicking for Pierce in games. I feel like Singletary's still the guy you want until Pierce steps up and takes a roll back. I'm not real comfortable putting Pierce in my lineup.
I'm taking the Broncos.
I'm going to take C.J. Stroud and the Texans.
Next up, we move to the afternoon slot games, a game that got flexed into the late window for reasons that surpass understanding. The 1-10 Carolina Panthers at the 4-7 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A lot of offensive coaches, along with head coach Frank Reich, got the boot this week. Will we see some kind of a resurgent offense for the Panthers?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's one thing when you fire the head coach and somebody else takes over and the offensive staff kind of stays intact and maybe you tweak some things that, some people have some ideas about that weren't being implemented. But I mean, they fired the running backs coach, they fired the quarterbacks coach, the owners out in the press talking about, oh, we were united on that team's a hot mess, to quote the dude from what's that kids train movie, the Polar Express. Hot mess. I'm not expecting a Las Vegas Raiders type of performance this week.
Yeah, me either. Meanwhile, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Rachaad White had probably one of his best games of the year, 15 carries, 100 yards last week. Chris Godwin a little bit banged up. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers need to keep winning to kind of stay in that 3-horse race. What are you expecting from White in this one?
I think this is a great game for White to actually put up some yards on the ground. Carolina can be run on. They give up the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs, 5th most rush yards, the most rushing touchdowns, and the 7th most receiving touchdowns, which is really where White has been making his hay this season, has been in the passing game. He's been terribly inefficient in the rush game. Though he's come on, he had a 15 for 100 game last week or the week before.
Yeah, last week, 15 for 100.
So the ability is there. And Baker has been playing well. Unfortunately, he can only support one receiver. So, Chris Godwin is a flex versus Mike Williams being the wide receiver 1. But I like White a lot this week. I think I would expect him to have a good game on the ground and probably catch 5 or 6 passes as well.
I'm taking the Buccaneers.
So am I.
Next up, we have the 7-4 Cleveland Browns against the 5-6 Los Angeles Rams. Dennis, Amari Cooper, Kareem Hunt, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson not really practicing. It's trending toward Joe Flacco starting. What are you expecting from this Browns offense?
I feel like Amari Cooper is probably going to play. I mean, he took a helmet to the midsection, so he's kind of just sore. I don't think there's his kidneys aren't bleeding or anything like that. His spleen didn't
that we know of.
Yeah, his spleen didn't get fractured. I think he'll be fine. He's a veteran. He doesn't have to practice every day all week long to be able to be involved in the passing game. I think if Flacco starts, it's a boost for the receivers. He's not terribly mobile, but I think he's good at getting rid of the ball. Last year we saw the Jets. I think that one game they threw it like 58 times or something. With him, he was
actually looking good. He was arguably better than Mike White for fantasy.
Yeah, I concur. And I think he'll probably be one of the better quarterbacks for the Browns this season. So as much as I think you want to develop Dorian Thompson-Robinson, you're fighting for a playoff. And if Flacco comes in and moves the ball, I think they got to stick with him the rest of the way.
Meanwhile, for the Rams, Kyren Williams just killed it upon his return. The Browns defense is equally beat up. Denzel Ward, Juan Thornhill, and Myles Garrett were all out of practice. How do you feel about Kyren Williams going up against the Browns defense?
Man, the Browns are really good versus running backs, but Kyren Williams has been really good against everyone when healthy. I mean, in that San Francisco game, he only had 100 yards from scrimmage, but he caught 6 passes and he scored 2 touchdowns. So he had a great fantasy day. Yeah, I could see him having maybe not a terribly efficient day, but he's going to get the volume. That's what they're going to do. Last week, they didn't give any other back a carry last week. And Ronnie Rivers had 1 target. Everything else from the running backs was Kyren Williams. So I don't know. Wait, that was the 49ers game, not last week. Disregard that last statement.
Last week, Royce Freeman had 16 for 77 and a touchdown because it was a lot of garbage.
I was talking out my ass.
But it's pretty much just Royce Freeman I think the only reason Freeman got so much work is because
They
they
were
were
whooping butt.
destroying them. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were up by 4 touchdowns.
So I think Williams is going to be good. He's a start. You're going to have him in your lineup. Fantasy Pros has him ranked as RB6. I don't think that's out of line at all.
I am going to take the Rams.
My bleeding heart's taking the Browns.
I mean, I think it could be a heck of a game. Probably the best game of the entire weekend is the 8-3 San Francisco 49ers at the 10-1 Philadelphia Eagles. Notably, after the NFC Championship game last year, Deebo Samuel said if they had a healthy quarterback, they would have won. Brock Purdy is healthy. How are we feeling about him going into this game?
Yeah, I feel good. Purdy is putting up good numbers. He's making use of his weapons, and he has a lot of weapons. Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel. They're loaded with. They've got 4 elite or near elite offensive weapons. And while Purdy may not be exceptional, I think at quarterback what we see sometimes is that you don't have to be an exceptional athlete. You don't have to be an exceptional thrower of the ball if you're an exceptional decision maker. And Purdy seems to be, pushing to be an exceptional decision maker. So I think he'll have a good game. Could he crap the bed? Yeah, he could, but I think they've got enough weapons. It's definitely going to be a very competitive game. I don't expect Philadelphia to run away with it.
Well, no matter how much pressure is on him because of the focus or the statement or whatever, you're right. The 49ers have an exceptional supporting cast, so you definitely like to go into that. For the Eagles, looks like Goddard probably still a long shot to play in this game. You're playing Hurts, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, and DeAndre Swift. Are there any other Eagles fringe pieces that interest you?
Not really. I mean, there's 6 teams on bye. Somebody's going to have Kenneth Gainwell in the lineup. Yeah. Somebody may, if you're playing DFS, maybe you roll the dice on Jack Stoll, at tight end if Goddard's out. Olamide Zaccheaus,
Didn't he catch a touchdown yesterday? Or not yesterday, last week?
Your low rent DFS play. I don't know. It's there are, it's a stars and scrubs team when it comes to skill position players in Philadelphia. And so, maybe Boston Scott Vulture's a TD. I don't know, but I'm playing Hurts, I'm playing Swift, I'm playing Smith, and I'm playing Brown.
I am taking the 49ers in this one.
I'm going to take the Eagles at home.
Next up, Sunday Night Football, Kansas City Chiefs 8-3 at the 5-6 Green Bay Packers. Dennis, they seem to have something going with Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce. Is there anyone else in the Chiefs passing game that interests you?
Justin Watson? I don't know.
Actually, if you were like a deep league desperation, Watson has caught touchdowns like 3 of the last 4 weeks, and the last 2 weeks, it seems like he's actually the second best. Forget Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, the no-handed man.
Yeah, they have such a narrow funnel. It's Kelce and it's Pacheco, and it's turning into Rashee Rice. I think if you're in Dynasty right now, if you can go out and buy Rashee Rice this week before the games start, I think so. One of my calls for this year was that Sky Moore would put up 1,000 yards because I felt like after being in this system for a year, that's what it really took to get acclimated. Going into year 2, he would ascend to that level. Now, did I think he would put up 1,500 yards? No, I thought he would put up 1,037 or something, which isn't an awful lot of yards per game. And he just didn't. Based on what Rashee Rice is doing, though, I see him going out next year. I could see him putting up, 1,100 or 1,200 yards next year. We see, as good as Travis Kelce is, Father Time is starting to catch up with him a little bit. Whether it's missing a game here or there, not being productive. I think the team needs to expand what they do because for so long it was Kelsey, Tyreek, and Mahomes, and we're gonna roll the dice, and it was just kept coming up sevens. Is that good or is it 11s? I don't know. I don't roll dice.
I've never played craps, so I don't know which ones you're looking for.
So they need to start to look at what's life post Kelsey look like, because Patrick Mahomes isn't going anywhere, and I think Rashee Rice is showing them what that could be.
Meanwhile, last week Christian Watson and Jordan Love seemed to be really on the same page together and productive for the first time kind of all season. Watson not on the injury report, even though almost all of the rest of his young offensive skill position friends are. Can Watson do it again this week?
Can he? He can.
You're not betting on it?
I think honestly, the biggest obstacle is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs defense. They get good pressure on the quarterback. George Karlaftis, has been known to cause some fumble issues in the backfield there. Chris Jones is a monster in the interior line. Nick Bolton and Willie Gay, they've got players on defense. And I think that's kind of part of the reason that, the offense isn't quite as pressing of a need because they're not having to just blow people out because their defense is bad. They've got a good defense. And I think that's what's really going to give Jordan Love problems. And that'll be what kind of keeps Christian Watson from matching last week. Could he have a decent game? Sure, he could. I'm not expecting last week.
I am taking the Chiefs.
So am I.
8-3 Jacksonville Jaguars at the 5-6 Cincinnati Bengals. Dennis, how are you feeling about the Jaguars' pass catching options?
Now that Zay Jones is back, I feel fantastic.
I know you're right. It is night and day for Ridley and the Ridley-Kirk split.
I mean, so if I'm Doug Peterson and I see this happening, why would I ever put Calvin Ridley in that position, whether Zay Jones is healthy or not? I'm going to put somebody in the Zay Jones spot and let them, make them do whatever dirty work it is Zay Jones does that allows Calvin Ridley to eat. Christian Kirk is still a decent wide receiver. Evan Ingram's producing. I'm probably more concerned about Travis Etienne and the way he's starting to get usurped a little bit by D'Ernest Johnson.
He's also hurting. He's on the injury report. I think it said groin, which is
who is
Etienne. I think that's why he ceded some work last week too. Let's see, rib injury.
Yeah. Etienne is still ranked pretty high, but he's kind of fading a little bit.
Yeah, not great. Next, so the Cincinnati Bengals, they're not getting Joe Burrow back, and last week Joe Mixon was terrible. Can he get it going at all?
As the kids say, he was ass.
I mean, he was definitely something in that range. There was a stench coming from the backfield. Do you think he can get it going again?
Well, let's see.
Or really for the first time. I think he only has 600 yards and 4 touchdowns all season, even though he has no real competition.
Jaguars give up the 3rd fewest fantasy points to running backs. So I don't know that I'm necessarily banking on it. Now, they do give up the most receptions in the NFL to running backs. So I don't know that they're going to run away with it. But, even if you get a little lead with Jake Browning, I'm not sure, how good you're going to be doing chasing them down. Get it, Chase? Huh? But T. Higgins is supposed to be back this week, too, it looks like.
Which I'd be more excited about that if I felt better about the robustness of passing game he was putting himself back into. I am taking the Jaguars.
So am I.
Well, that'll do it for the Week 13 preview. A lot of interesting games out there, including the one that is about to kick off here in just about 30 minutes, I think. They do 8:15 usually.
Think so, yeah.
So, Dennis, the people are trying to fill a little bit of time before the game and a little bit of time on Friday and Saturday. What can they do?
They can go to their favorite podcast platform, hit that subscribe button, download us right to your feed. You'll never miss an episode. Every Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever days it is that it uploads, it'll pop right there in your feed. You can hear our recaps and our previews. And we're just merely weeks away from starting off-season content. Now, you did a fantastic job scheduling us for like the long summer stuff. And we're going to have to start taking a look. We'll have to go back, look at our preseason rookie previews and, rankings and all that fun stuff. See,
I actually have some fun ideas. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be fun because, once we hit playoff season, we'll probably do some previews of the games, but there's not usually a ton to talk about with just doing playoff stuff. That'll do it for today. Wish you the best of luck. Penultimate week of the regular season for most people, and there's some lineup holes I know that I'm trying to fill. Hope you guys.
We need to have the NFL, appoint somebody as the NFL fantasy commissioner so they can say, let's work on this bye week schedule stuff.
At least week 14, the bye weeks are the Cardinals and the Commanders, which not to say they have no fantasy players, but that's not as bad. Wasn't it last year was the Chiefs and the Eagles? And you're sitting there in the deciding week of the regular season going, right, thanks. Well, you guys have a great weekend. We will see you on Tuesday.